And one of the most influential voices in moral compass in the world is the World Evangelical Alliance. It's large, over 650 million people, and they were proudly instrumental in getting the support of key countries for the recent arms trade treaty negotiations. We have the leadership of the World Evangelical Alliance here with Reverend Tullicott and Deborah Fikes, who's the UN representative. And their spokesperson on this issue, full disclosure, he was, I think, our first hire of the Global Security Institute when he was an honors graduate from Swarthmore College. And when he was at Yale Divinity School, roomed with my son. So I love this man. He has been a hope in my heart that the flame of pursuing peace and a nuclear weapons-free world that my conscience awakened is passed on to the next generation. He is a leader. He is an inspiration. He is an ordained Baptist minister and the chairman of the Global Task Force on Nuclear Weapons of the World Evangelical Alliance, Tyler Wigg Stevenson.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'm deeply grateful to the Permanent Mission of the Philippines and to the Global Security Institute for hosting this event, with special thanks to Ambassador Kabaktulan and Jonathan for inviting the World Evangelical Alliance's participation. The WA is one of 3 global Christian bodies, representing, as Jonathan said, more than 600 million across 129 national alliances, and it's my honor to join the other speakers and offer remarks on behalf of the WA today. Now, of course, one of the benefits of being an evangelical is that nobody expects you to be moderate in any way, shape, or form, so I will just jump right in. Let's begin by admitting that nearly 70 years after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that which can be thought about the immorality of nuclear weapons has already been said. We should not be anticipating some new piece of moral reasoning so sharp it will cut through the Gordian knot of global nuclear politics. Certainly, it will not come from the WA. Humility demands that we acknowledge that we are late in coming to trenches where our brothers and sisters from the Roman Catholic Church and World Council of Churches, as well as our neighbors from many other faith traditions, have labored long and faithfully, and hopefully our immoderation will make up for our tardiness. But to clarify that the 3 global bodies representing between them the world's 2 billion Christians are in vocal agreement on this matter for the first time in history, it's worth noting. Let me recapitulate that which we all know. Nuclear weapons, like every other creation of human hands, are a technology. At base, merely a technology. And like all technologies, they give us a capacity or an ability to do a particular thing, which in this case is make an unimaginably large explosion. Like all technologies, they cannot be uninvented. And thus, like all technologies, the first moral question regarding nuclear weapons is, what are the normative moral parameters for this capacity? Well, the 69-year and counting taboo against the use of nuclear weapons in war constitutes a robust de facto norm of non-use, the de jure force of which is upheld from a Christian perspective by any analysis of the theological ethics governing war and peace. And that means that the only legitimate goal for such weapons is that they never be used under any circumstances. Given this operating principle, then, the second moral question regarding nuclear weapons, which should unite us all, is which is the prudential structure best suited to manage the technology toward this outcome? Well, it's been alluded to already. During the Cold War, the prevailing conventional wisdom was, of course, that the threat of nuclear weapons, deterrence, was an essential component of ensuring their non-use. I leave aside for now whether that was ever moral. But in the multipolarity of the post-Cold War era, the perpetual reliability of deterrence to prevent nuclear conflict seems implausible at best. It is certain that the NPT and the nuclear power's reliance on deterrence cannot indefinitely coexist. Indeed, because deterrence requires nuclear possession, it incentivizes proliferation and thus instability, making it a seemingly self-defeating strategy, and thus a technique ostensibly intended to ensure nuclear non-use instead leads inexorably toward the opposite end. Now, however, a new conventional wisdom has emerged, for anyone with eyes to see at least, that the only prudential strategy with a chance of resulting in perpetual nuclear non-use is the universal prohibition and verifiable elimination of these weapons. And if this is true, then this is the only politics and the only policies deserving of any derivative moral sanction. Unfortunately, our actual politics may be going in precisely the opposite direction, but not because of moral disagreement, but because the narrowly conceived near-term security interests of each state seem to counsel precisely the opposite course of action that is required by the long-term existential security interests of all states. And I confess it thus seems unlikely to me that moral discourse will penetrate and transform the immediate situation. I may be the dour one up here. And as a result, I believe there is every likelihood that the countries of the world will fail us and will lead us into some form of nuclear catastrophe. I'm speaking personally here. The WA is not in the prognostication business. So what then of the moral compass? Why then speak if we cannot guarantee the efficacy of our words? A Roman general returning from foreign conquest in ancient days enjoyed the glory of a triumphal procession through the eternal city. And as legend had it, it was custom for him to have his slave sit with him in the chariot. And beneath the roars of the acclaiming crowd, the slave would murmur over and over again, memento mori, memento mori. Remember that you too will die. You, O king, are also mortal. We who traffic in moral claims are the slave, and we must be as relentless. Our words lack any power to compel. Our declarations are only accepted when they align with national interests. We are, in fact, entirely powerless. But our words are powerful because they are true. And that truth is that no matter how powerful the king, there is an authority that is greater still. The apparent absence of this authority on a global level, of course, is in fact the very crisis which the United Nations was created to address. And it will always be easy, even self-evident, for the powerful of the world to imagine that nothing and no one stands above them. But no, we say, there is a God in heaven who will someday judge. And therefore we speak so that there is a record of witness that no nation may stand before the throne of judgment and claim that they did not know. Well, and what is the standard of this judgment? Just this, that the stakes of the nuclear wager radically exceed the moral accounts of any nation. The recent rise in discussion about the humanitarian consequences of nuclear weapons, whose conferences the legal nuclear powers have so far decided not to attend, is a welcome reminder that these devices are not simply the province of state security. These are weapons of indiscriminate destruction with potentially limitless effect, and the lives that they put at risk are not trifling matters. The power that nations wield often gives them the illusion of substance. But states, and I mean no insult to those who serve their interest here, it's a noble calling. States, for all their worth, are purely functional entities existing to serve their people. They are at best beneficial fictions, albeit with guns. And at worst, they are demonic powers and principalities. They were not created in the image of God. Christ was not crucified for them. And the greatest of empires has less standing in the court of heaven than a single child. So we here respectfully remind them of their relative stature and plead that they recalibrate their standards of security. And who knows? Perhaps our murmuring in the chariot will have some effect. I don't expect it to, because the kings of the earth are notoriously deaf to the pleas of servants. But we may take hope by remembering that God has done stranger things than these. When the prophet Jonah preached God's judgment over Nineveh, the king put on sackcloth, and the city fasted and raised lament and repented, and all were saved. Thank you.